All right, mates, welcome back to the channel. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Hope everybody is doing well. We are beginning with our late fall LakeCast series, and we're going to start in and around Montgomery County, and we'll work our way up the Potomac River. So we're going to start with Rock Creek Regional Park. It is on the east side of Rockville, Maryland. Easily find Rockville along the Potomac River. Rock Creek, some of you may be familiar with, actually goes all the way down into, there's actually a Rock Creek Park, so don't get confused with Rock Creek in DC. Um, but Rock Creek will flow all the way down from Rockville through Silver Spring, down into cross into the District of Columbia, go all the way down to the Tidewater Lock, which is near the Watergate complex, and empty into the Potomac River, like Georgetown area, that kind of stuff. So it's again, Rock Creek is considered a trib, so of the Potomac. And though a lot of people run all through Rock Creek, along Rock Creek trails, all that stuff in both DC and Maryland. So Lake Needwood is we're going to concentrate on today and just demonstrate this here on the map for Eastern Rockville. But within that Rock Creek complex, Rock Creek Regional Park, you also have the second lake, which is actually right here near the Lakeside Trail, which is Lake Bernard Frank. Now, the caveat to that is you cannot kayak on Frank. Okay, you can bank fish, which is actually a pretty good lake. I mean, for bank fishing, if you want to take a kid fishing, you want to do that. But there's no boating, no kayaking, none of that on that particular lake. It's about 50 to 55 acres, I think. So I mean, that's a pretty nice sized lake. For bank fishing with shoreline access, for bank fishing. So, and it's part of, again, the Rock Creek Regional Park. It's a pretty big park that kind of winds around all through this section of Rockville. So we're going to concentrate up here on Lake Needwood, okay? And because Lake Needwood offers you the opportunity to do a lot of kayak fishing, as well as bank fishing. There's a lot of shoreline on Lake Needwood. These trails run all the way around Lake Needwood, okay? It is basically your equivalent of an urban / suburban park, okay? Like a regional park, that you would think of, as opposed to just, say, like Seneca Lake, Little Seneca Lake, which has the Black Hills Regional Park to it, which is a much bigger area, okay? Bigger lake, obviously, and bigger complex. But Lake Needwood offers a lot of neat things, especially for families, especially for kayakers, The one downside I will say to Lake Needwood that you need to be cognizant of is the blue-green algae propensity of this particular lake, because of why it was created in the first place, for soil erosion, for Rock Creek, heavy nitrogen, heavy phosphorus at times. So just, if you're going to take your dog, just be cognizant of that fact, for your animals, in terms of checking out when you're there. There are a bunch of signs everywhere that will warn you, just to be cautious of that bacteria, that can, at certain times of the year, create a little bit of havoc, especially on your dogs if they drink water out of the lake, or and all that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. But other than that, it has got great facilities. Some access points for you to get into some really great areas and some really great fishing. A lot of people do not talk about the Montgomery County parks, and a lot of their lakes that they have in the lower portion. Most of the time, people talk a lot about Up County, which is like, Clarksburg, little Seneca Lake that most people are familiar with, but not so much the county parks, in and around Rockville and Silver Spring area, Wheaton, down towards DC, with obviously the Potomac River coming on the underbelly of all of that. You've got all the locks. You guys know my channel. I cover the locks on the Potomac because that's primarily where I river fish. Today, we're looking at 50 degrees. It's not that bad outside. We had some rain. The river's still up. It got kind of blown out with a lot of that rain that we had post Tropical Storm Nicole And then we got more rain. I think it got up to about 7 or 8 feet. Now it's back down to 4 feet at Edwards Ferry. Probably down to about 2.5 at Point of Rocks. I didn't look at that this morning. We're gonna do a video on Point of Rocks coming up here in a few weeks. It'll have a neat little twist to it. For those of you, I've talked to a lot of mates. My channel's a little bit different. I fish different, and I talk about a lot of different stuff. We're gonna focus a little bit more on the history, a little bit more on the Native American, indigenous tribe names for a lot of these islands that are on the Potomac. Up at Point of Rocks, the Algonquin tribe, that the Algonquin versus the Iroquois, the Sasquatch, okay, which most people Susquehanna, right? Well, everything that happened along the Potomac from DC on up, and you've obviously got a lot of the tribes. Obviously, most people are more familiar with because of where we fish, Mattawoman, and all of the river names that are south city of DC in Maryland, and also a little bit to a lesser extent of Virginia. But you'll see the place names and the names along these areas. They're all obviously, Indian tribe, really pertaining to Indian tribes that all fish these areas, long before we showed up. So there's a lot of rich history there, especially in a lot of these islands. So we're going to cover a lot of that while we're fishing the islands, talk a little bit about the history, and why we have the things that we have. Like why do we have place names along our rivers like we do, and basically why they're called that from the English settlers that kind of built those relationships with the Native American tribes that were along the Potomac. So it's going to be kind of an interesting, different twist for those that like me or really love history, that want to take more things in, obviously, than just putting a lure in the water wherever you are and burning it. And so it's a little bit different. It's not everybody's poison. I understand that. But it's just doing something a little bit different for the fishing community that want to tie that in. We've also got a trip planned for Antietam Creek, all of that for Antietam, which is a little bit further up toward Sharpsburg, for that, and trout fishing and some other stuff that we're going to go down. Let's talk about that really quickly about Needwood. So it is a stocked lake, okay, by DNR, all right? And if you look at earlier this year, I think the earliest stocking was February or March. It's kind of interesting when DNR does their stocking, because they do it year round. I mean, different times of the year. Like they just got done doing some stockings in October. But March, April tend to be some big stocking periods for Lake Needwood, and a lot of them Montgomery County. You've got Great Seneca Creek that gets stocked. The watershed, the Northwest Beach, I think watershed gets stocked. So you've got February, March, April. You got some big time stocking going on at Needwood, and it's primarily trout. Now, that's really cool in a sense that a lot of the trout that get stocked at Needwood are golden trout. So that's a cool, in an urban setting, more or less. I mean, Rockville's a pretty, medium-sized to small-sized city. To have an area where you can go and get fish for rainbow trout and golden trout, as well as largemouth bass, crappie, and bluegill. I mean, for everyone. It's a family affair. It's a very family-friendly area. Tons of picnic areas, as you can see here. Tons of parks. That's got the full, even sell live bait at this place. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So you could take a kid fishing. You could do all that. Most people I know that follow the channel are more bass fishermen than trout fishermen. But it's one of those places, one of those lakes. I have my other lake I'm going to feature in the LakeCast series. It's one of my favorite lakes up in Western Maryland that Needwood reminds me of in this manner. It is an easy place to get to, in and out. You're like, basically you can get to the water less than 20 yards from where the trail. Like it's not, 100 feet in some places, like depending on where along you're going to park and you're going to walk. It's really, really easy to access. And you've got a lot of multi-species fish, okay, for you and to enjoy, to take a kid out on the water, take a veteran out on the water, to have a shot at. Whereas up in Western Maryland, it's smallmouth bass and walleye and trout. Okay, and my favorite Maryland lake, which I'm going to cover a lot more in the fall and winter. Because it's a haul. Like, it's 3 hours from me. It's a haul, but it's just one of those places that you just have to put on your bucket list, and we'll cover that in the LakeCast series a lot more in depth. We'll probably cover that on the water if I can get this trip done here. Now that we're at post Thanksgiving into that first or second week of December, man, because that is when those smallies absolutely just will crush the jerkbait, and you'll get into some walleye, and you'll get into some trout. It's just one of those things, okay? Because it's stocked. It's a stocked lake, just like Needwood. Needwood is a lot smaller, obviously, probably a lot more pressured. I mean, to be honest, because of where it's located, both from the bank and from a kayak. It's understand that it's electric only. But let's look at the stockings. Just keep this in mind. This lake is 75 acres. So it's 25 acres bigger than Frank, okay, in the same park. Okay? It's a 75-acre lake that got stocked 4 times this year. Okay? Or 3, at least 3 times, maybe 4. Actually, could be this fall, could be the 4th time. I was told it was going to be stocked 4 times. But I know it was stocked 3 times. Okay, February, March, and April. And it was stocked with over 3,500 trout, both rainbow and golden. I don't know what the ratio is between the two, but I imagine more rainbow in a 75 acre lake that already has an abundance of largemouth bass, mates. Now, to be honest, this lake is kind of pressured more from the bank. Now, they do rentals they got a boat rental, they got all that stuff too, okay? You can get a boat rental, kayaks, all that good stuff, all that. And there are certain times of the year, okay? But right now in the fall, you can go there and you could be the only one out. Okay, again, Frank, you cannot kayak on Bernard Frank, okay? But Needwood, you can kayak on. Now, the rental and all that stuff is closed for the season, okay? But you can still fish, and you can be out there. It reminds me a lot of some of the Central Virginia lakes that just don't get. I mean, some of them have cutoff periods, and I guess days you're not even allowed to fish it. So you always have to pay attention to that in Virginia. It's kind of wonky. Days they close days where you can't even go out. From a management perspective, I understand that, but it's kind of wonky when you're trying to plan a trip and all that stuff in there. But here, so you might be the only one. You might not see anybody else out there fishing in the fall and certainly in the winter. And if you do, it's predominantly going to be, a bank beater, which is awesome because they're catching fish. Like, I was just out there right before Thanksgiving, and 2 of the mates out there that were bank fishing were catching 2.5, 3 pound bass. From the bank, literally 25 yards out. Now, remember, if you're not familiar with this, it's got a pretty history that goes back to like 2010. Now, this lake was dammed up in 1965, okay? But around 2010, they did a lot of dredging because they found some inadequacies or inequities, I don't know which, post-flooding of 06, 07, okay, that basically impacted the whole area, like 2018 when the Potomac got flooded. Okay, so they did a lot of dredging, and actually the shallower end of the lake used to be about 2 to 3 feet deep. Now, that same shallower end from around 2010 is now 12 to like 16 feet. So think about that. It went from about 3 feet to 12 feet. So 4 times as much volume of water is now in the shallower end of the lake. So that's inevitably helped the fishery keep sustaining, its populations, which is probably why they haven't really stocked. I'll check again tonight on what the bass stockings were, but I don't think they've stocked largemouth bass heavily. I don't think they've needed to. just because the population has been able to sustain over a long period of time. I'll check out the history of that, and I'll post that up when I share this on Facebook. If you want to find any more information, it's JL Scott Fishing and Eats on Facebook, and I always try to give a little bit more in depth kind of information on the Facebook page than I can do in a video. But it's really an interesting, like a lot of people head out to this island. You see that a lot during the summertime. Um, there's definitely some great little areas to fish in this lake, especially, it doesn't really have the points that, say, a Little Seneca Lake has. That's got everywhere, like everywhere. There's 24 point, right? Like, so again, that's a good way to start out. If you're going there for the first time, is to go to these areas that you would traditionally go to when you're breaking down a lake. There's not a lot of it is shoreline, okay, and some of it is deeper drop offs, which you will find when you get out there, especially if you're using electronics. You're going to find, but a lot of it is going to be about a half a dozen point structure areas that, and I wouldn't even characterize this lake really as having secondary points, okay? Like for myself. I'm sure someone probably could argue that. But you can still find a lot of those depth change and flats in this lake. There were those flat areas and then a sharp drop off of 3 or 4 feet. And that's typically where, your lake fish for this particular lake, and mostly for in Montgomery County, because Bernard Frank's kind of the same. Pine View's a lot shallower, or Pine Lake is a lot shallower, than Needs for sure. This Needwood's got like a 65-foot earthen dam. Okay, so think of it that in that regard. Whereas, and it's a lot bigger. This one's a lot bigger than Frank, and obviously Pine Lake and Wheaton. Which I posted some photos of that the other day because I happened to go for a run. I'll cover that in the video coming up on off-season conditioning, off-season training, and all that stuff. To stay in the game. A lot of people start out the season slow, right? Because they have been out of their boat, they've winterized their boat, put their kayak away, they've done all that stuff, they've kind of thrown their hands up, or they're going hunting, and they're sitting in a tree stand, right? They're not, and then February, March happens, and boom, they're out kayaking again, and they get blown out, right? Like they're exhausted, they're winded, whatever. They're not used to, and they start their seasons off slow, especially a lot of tournament anglers you talk to. Struggle in February and March, and then get going in April, May, and June, right? And that's because of the things that you're doing right now. This is why it's an incredible opportunity to get out and fish. It's 50 degrees, and we're almost in December. And we're going to be in the 50s probably for the next week and a half. We'll drop to like the mid 40s and get back to the 50s, but this is to extend your fishing season. Again, get off the river where it's windy, all of that mess going on, blown out, slide into some of these lakes, hone your skills, hone your craft, throw some new baits, work on your electronics, work on your graphing, work on all of those things. You've got live scope, perfect opportunity this time of year to actually dial in live scope, which is confusing as hell for a lot of people, this guy included. I'm not a guy who's got live scope, okay, but I've been in the boat with people with live scope, and it I'm no mathematician, okay, but the guys that get that stuff dialed in, they get it dialed in, and they get on fish, and and that's what it's all about. But this is a perfect opportunity to so don't put your kayak away, don't put your boat to winterize your boat just yet. All of those things when the weather's still in the 50s, and you can get out there on some of these days when we get these spikes in temperatures and do some training, right? So I'm gonna do a video on controversial video coming up. Okay, is kayak bass fishing a sport? Okay, so just think on that until I drop that video. Okay, because there's a lot of controversy in that, because a lot of people don't treat it as a sport. Okay, sports have athletes train. Okay, do we have that in kayak fishing or in fishing in general? Okay, do our athletes train? Okay, so we're going to cover that. It's an interesting topic, right? But this is Lake Needwood, obviously, like I said, east of Rockville proper, Rock Creek Regional Park. It is a wonderful park to experience, to get out there. If you get one of these really nice Saturdays, Sundays, take a kid fishing, take them fishing on the bank if you don't want to bring the kayaks, okay? Um, they can fish and catch bluegill and crappie from the shoreline. Like I said, I saw the mates catching bass in the 2.5 to 3 pound range from the bank, okay, in the upper section, adjacent to the picnic area, okay. A lot of us will do our trail runs during this time of year. Obviously, you guys know today, it will be a trail run day, okay, and the trail run for training day would normally be in the summer all the way from April, May, all the way to end of September would be a Wade Ruck Monday, which is wade fishing in the upper Potomac with your ruck, okay, with your sack and 15, 20, 25, 30 pound weights in your backpack while you're fishing and walking in the water. It is an unbelievable training and endurance and getting in shape mechanism for you to enjoy while you're fishing. This time of year, typically the water is cold. The water can be blown out. We can have rising water levels like we've had. These 5, 6 feet. Like I said, it's probably 4 feet at Riley's. It's a lot harder. It's a lot, the comfort level is not really there than in the summertime. So then you do the same thing on the trail. You can use your tactical vest. If you have a tactical vest, and you've got your armor, then you can just use that, and that's your weight while you're running. Okay, and then after you get done running, like at Rock Creek or like at Wheaton Regional Park, like I do, I can spend an hour fishing from the bank if I don't bring my kayak. Okay, and so I can run the trails, put in 5 miles. Okay, this afternoon I'll probably run 3 miles and then fish for like an hour. Okay, and that's in your off season. That is what you're going to be doing in terms of training. Okay, and go to a new place. Go to these go to these lakes and parks you're not going to fish these parks. Let's be honest. You're not going to fish these parks, mate. If you're an avid smallmouth bass fisherman, or you're an avid tournament angler in the region, or you're an avid largemouth, you're not really going to be targeting these parks during the spawn, the spring, and the summer. You're going to be out fishing on the river, on the tidal Potomac or the upper Potomac. You're going to be fishing, a lot of other areas. But in the fall and in the wintertime, these lakes have fish, and they're easy to get to. They're easy to get out on the water. Okay, they're easy for you to get in there and get out, and without any hassle whatsoever. You're not traveling long distances. Rockville is very close to D.C. in Northern Virginia. Come right across 495 and head up 270, and you are right there. It is very, very easy during this time of year, be able to park, unload, get out on the water for a couple hours, try some new things out, extend your fishing season. Lake Needwood is an awesome place to do that because you will catch fish. There are 5-pound largemouth bass taken out of this lake regularly. And I mean spring, summer, fall, and winter. Okay? They're taken into this lake regularly. Just do Google search. I mean, I've talked to people. I myself have had great success for all the species on this lake. So much sometimes that you just got to change your baits because you're tired of catching trout. You're tired of catching bluegill or crappie. You know what I mean? You're trying to target another species, and the other species just won't leave you alone. So you got to move, or you got to change your bait and change your tactics. Okay. But that's Lake Needwood. If you got any questions, hit me up, Facebook Messenger, JL Scott Fishing and Eats. If you happen to be in the area, if you live in Montgomery County or greater Northern Virginia, DC, DMV area, and you want to hit that lake up and you want to come out, hit me up with a message. Okay. It is very, very close to me. Like I said, I could be there in 15, 20 minutes. And so, like I said, it is a lake that's got an abundance of multi-species opportunities. I wish it had walleye, mates, but it doesn't. Okay? Maybe at some point, maybe with only it being 75 acres and the abundance of what it already has, they won't consider stocking walleye there. But walleye is something that's making a major push right now with a lot more people getting into it. We're seeing the populations expand in our river systems as well as some of our Western Maryland lakes. And they are starting to catch some biggins. You've got on the Virginia side, if you're watching this channel, you've got Lake Brittle, which is out towards Fauquier County, adjacent to Loudoun County. Check out Lake Brittle. I've got a video on the channel. I'll do another one because I plan on going out again for some wintertime walleye there. You've also got the river systems as well in Western Virginia, as well as, like I said, our Western Maryland Lake. So if that's something you're interested in, again, that is one of the species that's starting to grow in popularity because they're fun to catch and they're pretty damn big. And let me tell you, they are some good eating fish. If you are someone like myself who really thinks that like blackened snakehead is a really, really good sandwich and has replaced, say, blackened mahi-mahi for me as just a sandwich, try some walleye. Try some butter lemon walleye or some blackened walleye. And I'm telling you, it nothing like that fish. And they're now just getting really, really big. So we're going to cover those lakes that have the walleye, the trout, and the smallmouth bass in one of the other lake casts coming up. But today was just the first one for Lake Needwood in Montgomery County, Maryland, outside Rockville, Virginia. Again, hit me up if you have any questions or if you'd like to go fishing.